The sound of shattering glass cut through the small house like a gunshot. Ren Calloway, 17 years old, and 5'6" of wiry muscle earned from 3 years of high school track, froze at the top of the stairs. The frame that had held her mother's photograph, the one taken at the county fair 2 summers before the accident, now lay in pieces on the hardwood floor below. Grant Holloway stood over the wreckage, his work boots grinding the glass into glittering powder. He was drunk. Again. The kind of drunk that turned his eyes into flat, lightless discs and made his hands into blunt instruments. The kind of drunk that had started 3 months after her mother's funeral and had never really stopped. You see this? His voice was a slurred growl, thick with cheap whiskey and 8 months of accumulated rage. This is all I got left of her. And you look just like her. Every damn day I gotta see her face in yours. Ren said nothing. She had learned in the 247 days since the accident that had taken her mother that silence was armor. Words were targets. Explanations were invitations. So she stood on the landing, her hand white-knuckled on the banister, and she waited. Grant kicked the broken frame across the room. It hit the wall and splintered further. "Get out," he said. The words were so quiet she almost didn't hear them. "What?" "I said get out." Louder now. His face was flushed, blotchy red, crawling up his neck like a rash. "Get your stuff. Get out of my house. I'm done. I'm done with you. Done with her ghost. Done with all of it." The rain had started an hour ago. Ren could hear it hammering against the roof, a relentless percussion that seemed to synchronize with the pounding of her heart. Outside, the temperature was dropping. The radio had said 34 degrees, near freezing. The first real cold snap of October. "It's raining," she said. The stupidity of the observation hit her, even as the words left her mouth, but she couldn't stop them. It's almost midnight. Grant took 3 steps toward the stairs. His hand went to his belt. The leather made a sharp crack as he pulled it free from the loops. "You got 5 minutes," he said, "or I come up there and drag you out myself." Ren turned and ran. Her room was small, 10 by 12. A narrow bed, a particle board dresser, a closet that smelled like mildew. She had been preparing for this moment for 6 weeks. Ever since the night Grant had shoved her against the kitchen counter hard enough to crack a rib. Ever since she had realized that the man her mother had married, the electrician, with steady work and a quick smile, was gone. Hollowed out and replaced by something mean and broken. The military surplus backpack was under her bed. 60 liters, olive drab. She had bought it at a yard sale for $12. Inside, carefully packed and repacked over dozens of anxious nights, was everything she owned that mattered. A hatchet, small but sharp. She had honed the edge herself on a whetstone borrowed from the school shop class. A pry bar. 14 inches of flat steel. A canvas tarp, 8 by 10. Waterproof. Duct tape, an entire roll. Waterproof matches in a plastic case. 50 of them. Paracord, 20 feet. Wire, thin gauge. For snares, a wool blanket. Scratchy and moth-eaten but warm. 2 changes of clothes. Thermal underwear. Thick socks. A water bottle. Empty. She would fill it from the bathroom sink. and at the very bottom, wrapped in a plastic bag, her mother's driver's license. The small rectangle of laminated plastic was all she had left that proved her mother had existed, had been real, had loved her. Wren shrugged into her heaviest flannel shirt, pulled on her work boots, the ones with the steel toes that she wore when she helped old Mr. Brennan split wood for weekend cash. She grabbed her jacket, not warm enough, not nearly warm enough for a night like this. But it was all she had. The backpack settled onto her shoulders. 40 pounds, maybe 45. Heavy enough to make her stagger for a moment before her legs adjusted to the weight. Downstairs, Grant was shouting. The words were indistinct, a roar of noise and fury. Something else shattered. Probably the lamp. He liked to break the lamp. Wren opened her bedroom window. The screen came away easily. She had loosened the screws 2 weeks ago, just in case. The roof of the back porch was 6 feet below. She swung her legs over the sill, tested her weight on the shingles, and dropped. The rain hit her like a cold fist. Within seconds, her jacket was soaked through. The water found every gap, every seam, every vulnerable inch of skin. It was not just rain. It was malice. The sky itself trying to drive her back inside. Back to Grant and his belt and his rage. She hit the ground running. The backyard was a 1/4 acre of overgrown grass and rusted auto parts. Grant's truck sat in the driveway, rusted and corroded the engine, coughing black smoke every time it started. The transmission slipped worse every week. Wren ran past it, past the property line, past the last streetlight, and into the black wall of the state forest that bordered the eastern edge of town. Behind her, the back door slammed open. Grant's voice, raw and animal, cut through the rain. "Wren, you get back here. You hear me? You get back here right now." She did not look back. She could not afford to. Looking back was doubt. Doubt was hesitation. Hesitation was death. The forest swallowed her whole. The undergrowth was a tangled mess of briars and fallen branches. Every step was a negotiation. Every footfall a small battle against the sucking mud and hidden roots. Wren had no flashlight, no headlamp, nothing but the faint, useless glow of the cloud-covered moon filtering through the canopy above. She moved by feel, hands out, testing each step. The rain was a constant, numbing presence. It filled her ears, blurred her vision, turned the world into a smeared watercolor of blacks and grays, and then cutting through the chaos, a sound that made her stop dead. A bark, low and urgent. Ghost. The dog emerged from the shadows like his name. A German shepherd mix, 3 years old with one ear, that stood up and one that flopped down. He had been her mother's dog, a rescue from the county shelter. After the accident, he had become Wren's shadow, her constant silent companion. Grant hated him, had threatened more than once to take him to the woods and put a bullet in his head. So Wren had started leaving him outside, chained to the oak tree in the backyard during the day, free to roam at night, building his independence, teaching him to survive without her, just in case. Ghost pressed his wet body against her leg. His tail gave a single uncertain wag. He knew something was wrong. Dogs always knew. "Come on, boy," Wren whispered. Her voice was raw, shaking. "We gotta move." She had no leash, no collar, just her hand buried in the thick fur of his ruff as they pushed deeper into the forest, away from the house, away from Grant, away from everything that had once been normal and safe and predictable. The rain continued to fall. The temperature continued to drop. And somewhere behind them, growing fainter with every step, Grant's voice continued to shout her name into the uncaring dark. The state forest was 60,000 acres of old-growth pine and oak. Wren had hiked the edges of it a dozen times. Day trips with her mother. Afternoons skipping school to walk the fire roads and pretend the world was simpler than it was. But she had never gone deep. Never pushed past the marked trails and into the wild, tangled heart of it. Now she had no choice. Her legs burned. Her lungs burned. The cold was no longer just uncomfortable. It was invasive. A living thing that crawled beneath her skin and wrapped around her bones. She could feel her body starting to shut down. The shivering that had started as a minor annoyance was now violent, uncontrollable. Hypothermia. The word floated through her mind with clinical detachment. She had read about it in a survival manual she had checked out from the library. The stages, the symptoms, the inevitable stupid mistakes that people made when their core temperature dropped below 95 degrees. She needed shelter. She needed it now. Ghost stopped walking. His head came up. His ears swiveled forward. He was staring at something ahead. Something Wren could not see. "What is it, boy?" The dog whined. A high, thin sound. Then he pulled forward his body low and tense, leading her toward a darker patch of shadow that rose up from the forest floor like a frozen wave. Rock. A massive outcropping of granite, 30 feet tall, maybe 40. The face of it was sheer and slick with rain draped in a thick curtain of ivy and moss. Wren's numb fingers found the stone. It was solid, real. The first permanent thing she had touched since leaving the house. Ghost was pawing at the base of the outcrop. His claws scraped against something that was not stone. Something that gave a dull, hollow thud. Wood. Wren dropped to her knees. Her hands tore at the ivy. The vines were thick, old. They came away in reluctant handfuls, revealing beneath them a series of weathered gray planks, horizontal, nailed across a narrow fissure in the rock face. A door. Someone had built a door into the mountain. The pry bar was cold and heavy in her shaking hands. She wedged the flat end between the top plank and the granite, leaned her weight into it. For a moment, nothing. The wood was swollen with decades of moisture, fused to the stone. Then, with a groan that sounded almost human, a single nail began to pull free. The head of it was rusted brown, ancient. The plank splintered as it came loose. The sound was sharp and final. Wren worked her way down, prying, pulling, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Each plank was a battle, each nail a small victory. The rain hammered down, the wind screamed through the trees, and slowly, inch by inch, the opening grew. When it was large enough, she clicked on the small keychain flashlight she had in her pocket. The beam was weak, pathetic, but it was enough to show her the space beyond. A cave, low-ceilinged, maybe 10 feet deep. The floor was smooth stone, dry, utterly, impossibly dry. "Go," she whispered to Ghost. "In?" The dog did not hesitate. He scrambled through the opening. Wren shoved the backpack in after him, then wriggled through herself. A splinter from one of the broken planks caught her shoulder, tore through her jacket and the shirt beneath. She felt the hot sting of blood, but she did not stop. And then she was inside. Out of the rain, out of the wind. The silence was so sudden it felt like violence. She lay on the cold stone floor, shaking, gasping Ghost's wet body pressed against hers. And for the first time in 8 months, Wren Calloway allowed herself to cry. The tears did not last long. Crying was a luxury, a waste of energy and heat. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and sat up. The flashlight beam played across the walls of the cave. The space was larger than it had first appeared. Not just 10 feet, more like 15. And the ceiling, though low near the entrance, rose higher toward the back. In the center of the floor, a circle of blackened stones. A fire pit. Old, long cold, but unmistakable. Someone had lived here, or at least stayed here long enough to build a fire, to arrange stones, to make the space, however briefly, a home. Wren's teeth were chattering so hard she bit her tongue. The taste of blood was sharp and metallic. She needed heat. Needed it more than food, more than sleep, more than anything. The tarp from her backpack became a makeshift partition. She strung it across the entrance using paracord tied to jutting rocks. It was not airtight, not even close. But it blocked some of the wind, some of the rain. Enough. Dry wood was a problem. Everything outside was soaked. Useless. But in the back corner of the cave, tucked against the wall, she found a small pile of sticks. Bone dry. Left by whoever had been here before. She sent up a silent prayer of gratitude to the ghost of that unknown person. The matches were in her pocket. Waterproof. Guaranteed. She struck one against the rough stone of the cave floor. It flared to life. The tiny flame was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She fed it carefully. Twigs first, then slightly larger sticks. Building the fire with the patience her mother had taught her on camping trips, that now felt like they had happened in another lifetime. The flames grew, hesitant at first, then bolder. The smoke rose toward the ceiling and found cracks in the rock. Natural ventilation. Luck. Or maybe the person who had used this place before had known what they were doing. The heat was immediate, overwhelming. Wren stripped off her soaked jacket, her flannel shirt. She wrung them out as best she could and hung them on rocks near the fire. The thermal underwear beneath was damp, but not drenched. She pulled the wool blanket from her pack and wrapped it around her shoulders. Ghost lay down beside the fire. His eyes were half closed, exhausted. Wren pulled a strip of beef jerky from her pack. It was one of 6 she had. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 2 days if she was careful. She split it in half, gave one piece to the dog, chewed the other slowly, making it last. Outside, the rain continued its assault. But inside, for the first time since Grant had shattered her mother's photograph, Wren felt something that was almost calm. She was wet. She was cold. She was terrified. But she was alive, and she was free. She lay down on the stone floor. Ghost curled against her stomach and closed her eyes. Sleep came hard and fast. A black, dreamless void. When she woke, the fire had burned down to embers. The light filtering through the gaps in her tarp was gray and weak. Dawn, or something close to it. The rain had stopped. The silence was total. Wren sat up. Her body was a catalog of aches. Her shoulder, where the splinter had caught her, was crusted with dried blood. Her hands were raw, blistered from the pry bar. But she was warm, dry, alive. Ghost was already awake, sitting near the entrance, staring into the darker recesses of the cave. His ears were up, his body tense. "What is it, boy?" The dog whined, did not move, just stared. Wren grabbed the flashlight. The beam was dimmer now, the battery dying. She stood the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders and walked toward the back of the cave. The main chamber ended in what she had assumed was a solid wall, but now in the pale light she could see it was not solid. There was a continuation, a narrow passage, just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Ghost did not follow her. He stayed at the entrance to the passage, watching. Wren stepped through. The second chamber was larger than the first, maybe 20 feet across. The ceiling here was higher, 8 feet, maybe 9. The air smelled different, stale, undisturbed for a very long time. Another fire pit. This one more elaborate. The stones were carefully arranged. There were marks on the walls, scratches, intentional. She moved closer, shone the light on them. Initials, carved deep into the rock, ST 1987. Wren's breath caught. 1987, 37 years ago. She ran her fingers over the letters. They were rough, crude, but deliberate. Someone had spent time on this, had claimed this space, had marked it as theirs. And then she saw it. In the far corner, half hidden in shadow, a shape that her brain refused to process for a moment. Tried to classify as a pile of sticks, a bundle of old cloth, but it was not sticks. It was not cloth, it was bones, a skeleton, curled on its side, the skull tilted back as if looking up at the ceiling, the rib cage collapsed inward, the legs drawn up to the chest, the remains of clothing still clinging to the frame, a faded green jacket, combat boots, dog tags resting in the hollow of the chest. Wren's hands shook as she knelt beside it. She should not touch it. She knew that. This was a crime scene, or at least the scene of a death. But her fingers moved anyway, reaching for the dog tags. They were cold, the metal tarnished and pitted. She lifted them into the light. Silas Thorne, born 1930. Beneath the tags tucked into the rib cage was a piece of paper, folded, brittle with age. Wren unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible. Whoever finds this, the ridge keeps who it chooses. Prove you're worth it. ST 1987. Wren sat back on her heels. The note trembled in her hands. Silas Thorne, born 1930, died here, in this cave, alone, 37 years ago. She looked around the chamber with new eyes. This was not just a shelter. It was a tomb. And she was not the first desperate soul to seek refuge in these cold stone walls. Ghost appeared in the passage. He approached slowly, sniffed the air near the skeleton. Then, as if understanding the solemnity of the moment, he sat down beside Wren and leaned his weight against her. "I guess we're not alone after all," Wren whispered. The rest of the morning was spent in exploration. Wren moved through the cave with methodical care, cataloging everything. The 2 chambers, the fire pits, the natural ventilation cracks in the ceiling, the smooth stone floor, the narrow passage connecting the spaces. In the 2nd chamber near Silas Thorne's remains, she found a rusted knife. The blade was pitted and dull, but it was still a blade. And beside it, an old canteen, dented, empty, useless except as proof that someone had tried to survive here. That was it. No hidden cache of supplies, no stockpile of food or tools, nothing but the bones of a man who had run out of time. Wren carried Silas's remains outside. It took 3 trips. She was careful, reverent. This man, whoever he had been, deserved better than to be left in the dark. She found a spot 50 yards from the cave, a clearing where the ground was soft enough to dig. Using the hatchet in her hands, she carved out a shallow grave. It took hours. Her hands blistered, bled. But she did not stop. When it was deep enough, she laid Silas's bones to rest, covered them with earth, marked the spot with a cairn of stones. It was not much, but it was something. Ghost sat beside the grave while she worked, silent, patient, a witness. When it was done, Wren knelt beside the stones. She had no words, no prayers. Her mother had not been religious, and neither was she. But it felt wrong to leave without saying something. "Thank you," she finally said. Her voice was hoarse. "For the shelter, for the fire pit, for proving it could be done." The wind moved through the trees. The only response. Wren stood, wiped the dirt from her hands, and walked back to the cave. The first week was a brutal education in failure. The fire pit in the main chamber produced smoke, thick, choking smoke that filled the space and drove her outside coughing and gasping. The ventilation cracks were not enough, not nearly enough. She needed a better system. She remembered reading about something called a Dakota fire hole, a design used by Native Americans and frontiersmen. 2 pits connected by an underground tunnel. 1 pit for the fire, 1 for air intake. The smoke was pulled down and dispersed through the earth instead of rising into the air. It sounded simple. It was not. Her first attempt was a disaster. She dug the fire chamber too shallow. The intake tunnel collapsed. The whole thing filled with dirt and had to be abandoned. The second attempt was better, but the angle of the tunnel was wrong. The air did not flow. The fire smothered itself. The third attempt took 2 full days. She dug the fire chamber 18 inches deep and 14 inches across. The intake tunnel was 8 inches in diameter, angled to connect at the base of the fire chamber. She carved a narrow flue from the top of the fire pit up through the cave wall, directing it to a fissure hidden among the rocks outside. When she lit the fire, she held her breath. The flames caught, fed by the air being pulled through the intake. The smoke did not rise into the cave. It was pulled down through the tunnel and up the hidden flue, dispersed into the forest. Wren sat back, stared at the fire, and for the first time since leaving Grant's house, she smiled. The door was next. The planks she had torn away to get inside were useless, splintered and rotten. She needed new wood, strong wood, and she needed a lot of it. A quarter mile from the cave, she found a fallen pine, dead, but not yet decayed. The wood was seasoned, dry, perfect. She spent 3 days with the hatchet, cutting, splitting, shaping rough planks from the trunk. Each plank was 6 feet long, 8 inches wide, 2 inches thick. She made 8 of them, dragged them back to the cave one at a time. Building the door frame was an exercise in problem solving. She had no nails, no screws, but she had paracord and duct tape and sheer stubborn will. She lashed the planks together, reinforced the joints with strips of green wood bent and wedged into place. It was crude, ugly, but it was solid. The frame fit into the cave entrance, snug. She carved brackets into the rock itself using Silas's old knife and a stone, wedged a thick oak branch across the inside as a crossbar. From the outside, the door was invisible, hidden by the regrown ivy she had carefully draped back over the entrance. From the inside, it was a fortress gate. Wren tested it, pushed against it, threw her weight into it. The door held. The crossbar held. The cave was no longer just a shelter. It was a home, defended, secure. Food was the constant problem. She had 6 strips of jerky, 3 granola bars, a half-empty jar of peanut butter. Not enough, not even close. She set snares using the wire from her pack, small loops placed along game trails. She checked them every morning and every evening. The first 4 days, she caught nothing. On the 5th day, one snare held a rabbit, small, lean, but meat. She skinned it using Silas's knife. The blade was dull, but it worked. She cooked the rabbit over her Dakota fire hole, the smell of roasting meat filling the cave and making Ghost's tail thump against the stone. It was the best meal of her life. By the end of the first week, Wren had established a rhythm. Wake at dawn, check snares, gather firewood, tend the fire, eat sparingly, sleep when the sun went down. Her clothes dried, her blisters hardened into calluses. The cut on her shoulder scabbed over and began to heal. Ghost grew sleek on rabbit scraps and the occasional squirrel. The cave stopped feeling like a hiding place and started feeling like something else, something permanent. On the 7th night, Wren sat by the fire and pulled Silas Thorne's note from her pocket. She had kept it, folded it carefully, and tucked it away. Now she read it again by the flickering light. The ridge keeps who it chooses. Prove you're worth it. She had proven something. Maybe not to the ridge, maybe not to Silas, but to herself. She was not the girl who had been thrown out into the rain. She was not a victim. She was a builder, a survivor, a keeper of fire and stone. Outside, the October wind moved through the trees. Inside, the flames danced. And Wren Calloway, 17 years old and utterly alone, closed her eyes and slept the sleep of the earned. The second week brought snow. Not the heavy, wet snow of deep winter, but the first tentative dusting, a promise of what was coming. Wren woke to find the entrance of her cave rimmed with white, the ivy curtain glittering with frost. Ghost's breath made small clouds in the cold air. She had learned to wake before dawn, had trained her body to respond to the subtle shift in temperature that came just before sunrise. The fire in the Dakota hole had burned down to coals. She fed it carefully. 3 small sticks, then larger pieces, building the heat back up with the economy of someone who understood that every stick of wood was earned through labor. The snares had been good to her. 5 rabbits in the last 3 days. She was learning their patterns, where they ran, when they ran, how to place the wire loop at exactly the right height to catch the neck instead of the leg. But rabbits were not enough, not for the long term. She needed variety, needed fat, needed the kind of calories that would sustain her through a mountain winter. The deer trails crisscrossed the ridge like a highway system. She had been watching them, studying the tracks, the droppings, the height of the browse marks on saplings. There were whitetails here, big ones. A single deer could feed her for weeks if she could find a way to preserve the meat. But deer required a different kind of hunting, required a weapon that could kill at distance. The bough had been her project for the last 4 days. She had found a young ash tree, straight-grained and flexible, cut a 6-foot section and stripped the bark, carved it carefully with Silas's old knife, shaping the limbs, tapering them toward the tips. The string was paracord, not ideal, but functional. The arrows were harder. She made them from straight shoots of dogwood. Fire hardened the tips, fletched them with feathers from a crow she had found dead near the stream. They were crude, ugly. But when she drew the bow and released, they flew. Not far, not accurately, but they flew. She practiced every evening, shot at a stump she had marked with charcoal. 20 arrows, retrieve, 20 more. Her shoulder ached. Her fingers blistered. But the arrows began to group tighter, began to hit closer to the mark. It was on the 16th day that she found the journal. She had been expanding the second chamber, digging a cold storage pit into the floor, a place to keep meat frozen during the winter months. The stone was hard. The work was slow. But 3 feet down, her hatchet struck something that was not rock. A metal box, small, barely larger than a shoebox, wrapped in canvas and sealed with wax that had cracked and crumbled with age. Wren's hands shook as she pried it open. Inside, protected from moisture and time, was a leather-bound journal. The cover was stained and worn but intact. On the first page, written in neat block letters, was a name. Silas Thorne, Journal, 1984 to 1987. Wren sat down hard on the cold stone floor. Ghost came and pressed against her side. She opened the journal and began to read. The early entries were matter-of-fact, almost clinical. October 12th, 1984. Found the cave today. Natural shelter. Good drainage. Will work. Need to seal entrance. Need fire system. Korean winter taught me cold kills faster than bullets. October 20th, 1984. Fire hole complete. Smoke disperses clean. No visible signature. Good concealment essential. The dreams are worse at night. Need work to keep mind occupied. November 3rd, 1984. First deer. Dressed and hung. Temperature dropping. Will preserve well. Remember the chosin. Frozen meat kept us alive. This is different. This is choice. Wren turned pages. Months passed. The entries grew longer, more personal. January 15th, 1985. 3 months now. No contact with town. Don't miss it. The noise, the questions, the looks from people who weren't there, who don't understand what it does to you, the things you see, the things you do. Sarah left because I couldn't explain, couldn't make her understand that I wasn't the same man who left. Nobody comes back the same. March 22nd, 1985. Spring coming. Saw first robin. Ironic. Symbol of renewal. But some things don't renew. Some things just survive. Built better door today. Oak. Solid. Reminds me I'm not running. I'm choosing. There's a difference. July 4th, 1985. Fireworks in town. Heard them from here. Each explosion, each crack, takes me back. 30 years gone, but the sound is fresh. The smell, the fear. Built this place to escape that. But you can't escape what's inside you. You can only learn to live with it. The entries continued through 1986. Detailed notes on trap placement, edible plants, water sources. The journal of a man teaching himself to survive, but also teaching himself to live with ghosts. Then the final year, 1987. The handwriting began to deteriorate. January 10th, 1987. Bad cough. 2 weeks now. Getting worse. Should go to town. But what's the point? What am I going back to? At least here I'm free. February 3rd, 1987. Fever. Can't keep food down. Pneumonia, probably. Knew the risks. Made the choice. No regrets. The ridge has been good to me. Better than I deserved. March 1st, 1987. Very weak now. Can't leave cave. This is it. Not afraid. Faced worse in Korea. At least here it's on my terms. To whoever finds this, the ridge keeps who it chooses. If you're reading this, you were chosen. Prove you're worth it. Don't waste the chance I'm giving you. Don't end up like me. Alive, but not living. Living, but not alive. Find the balance. ST. The entry ended there. The rest of the pages were blank. Wren closed the journal. Her eyes were wet. She wiped them with the back of her hand. Silas Thorne had not been hiding from the world. He had been hiding from himself, from the war that had broken something inside him. He had built this place. had survived here for 3 years. But in the end, pride and isolation had killed him. She would not make the same mistake. That night, she wrote her own entry on the first blank page she found. November 2nd, 2024. My name is Ren Calloway. I'm 17. I found this place running from a different kind of war. I buried your bones, Silas. Gave you the dignity you earned. I'll try to do better than you did. Try to survive and live. Thank you for the shelter. Thank you for the lesson. W.C. She closed the journal and placed it on a natural shelf in the rock. A record. A witness. A promise. The man appeared on the 23rd day. Ren was checking her trap line. A circuit that took her 2 miles through the forest and back. She had 14 snares set. A good mix of locations. High success rate. She was kneeling beside the 7th trap, resetting the wire loop after removing a fat rabbit when Ghost went rigid. The dog's ears came forward. His lips pulled back from his teeth. A low growl started deep in his chest. Ren's hand went to the hatchet on her belt. She stood slowly, scanned the trees. He was 50 yards away, standing in the shadow of a large oak, watching her. A man, late 30s, maybe 40, tall, over 6 feet, broad-shouldered and lean in the way of people who did physical work for a living. He wore faded canvas work pants and a brown Carhartt jacket. A rifle was slung over his shoulder. Bolt action. Hunting grade. He made no move toward her. Just stood there. Assessing. Ren's heart hammered against her ribs. She forced herself to breathe slowly. To not show fear. Predators could smell fear. Men were predators. "That's my trap you're checking," the man said. His voice was deep, gravelly, not hostile, but not friendly either. "No," Ren said. "It's mine. I set it 5 days ago. On my grandfather's ridge." The words hit her like cold water. Grandfather. Silas Thorne. The man stepped out of the shadow, into a patch of weak sunlight filtering through the canopy. His face was weathered, lined. He had a 3-day beard and eyes the color of creek water. Hard eyes. Veteran's eyes. "You've been living in the cave," he said. Not a question. A statement. Ren said nothing. Her hand stayed on the hatchet. "Found it a month ago," the man continued. "Saw the smoke from my tree stand. Took me a while to track it down. You did good work with the fire hole. Can barely see the signature even when you know where to look. Who are you?" "Briggs Thorne. Silas was my grandfather. My mother's father. He disappeared in '84. Just walked into these woods one day and never came back. Family searched for months. Sheriff searched. Nothing. Declared him dead in '91. I found his bones," Ren said quietly. "I buried them. Marked the grave." Something shifted in Briggs Thorne's face. Not quite a smile. Not quite grief. Something in between. "Where?" Ren hesitated, then pointed. 50 yards north of the cave. Clearing with 3 birch trees. I made a cairn." Briggs was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Thank you for that. He deserved better than to rot in the dark. He left a journal. He was Korean War. Had bad dreams. Pneumonia got him in '87. That tracks. Mom said he was never right after he came back. 60,000 casualties at the Chosin Reservoir. He was one of the survivors. But survival isn't the same as living. The words echoed what Wren had read, what Silas himself had written. This ridge, Briggs said, his tone shifting back to business. Legally, it's state forest, but my family has hunted it for 4 generations. My trap lines, my territory. I don't take kindly to poachers. I'm not a poacher. I'm surviving. Surviving on my ridge, using my game. Wren's jaw tightened. Your grandfather died here 40 years ago. You never even found his body. This isn't your ridge anymore. The hell it isn't. Then prove it, Wren said. The words came out before she could stop them. Reckless, dangerous, but true. Briggs Thorne stared at her, really looked at her for the first time. Took in her worn clothes, her raw hands, the way she stood, planted, unafraid. You're just a kid. I'm 17. Old enough. Old enough for what? To freeze to death like Silas, to starve when the deer migrate down the mountain. Old enough to make my own choices. Old enough to live or die by them. The silence stretched. Ghost's growl had faded to a low rumble. The dog was still tense, still watching. Finally, Briggs spoke. We'll see. He turned and walked away, melted back into the forest like smoke. The rifle on his shoulder never moved, never pointed at her. But the threat was implicit, clear. Wren stood in the clearing for 5 full minutes after he was gone. Her legs were shaking. She sat down hard on a fallen log and put her head in her hands. Ghost came and pressed his nose against her palm. Warm, solid, real. We're in trouble, boy, she whispered. The dog's tail gave a single uncertain wag. 3 days later, Wren discovered the sabotage. She was checking her trap line again. The routine was muscle memory now. Walk the circuit. Check each snare. Reset. Move on. But something was wrong. The 4th trap was sprung. The wire loop broken. Deliberately cut. The 7th trap was gone. Completely removed. The stake pulled from the ground. The 9th trap was moved. Relocated 10 feet from where she had set it. Placed in a spot where no rabbit would ever run. Wren's hands curled into fists. Briggs Thorne. It had to be. He was testing her, trying to drive her off the ridge by making survival impossible. Her first instinct was rage, hot and immediate. She wanted to track him down, confront him, demand he stop. But that was what he expected. That was the response of someone who could be intimidated, driven away. Wren took a slow breath, forced herself to think. Briggs had sabotaged 3 traps. Out of 14, he had left the others alone. Why? Because he was testing, seeing how she would respond, if she would quit, run crying to the authorities, abandon the ridge, or if she would adapt. Wren walked the rest of the trap line, took stock of what remained. 11 functional snares. Not ideal, but enough. Then she hiked another mile north, into territory she had not yet explored. Found fresh deer trails, fresh scat, active feeding areas. Set 6 new traps. Better locations than the ones Briggs had destroyed. Harder to find. Harder to sabotage. Over the next week, her new trap line produced better than the old one. 13 rabbits, 2 squirrels. She was eating well, building reserves. She never confronted Briggs, never complained, just moved her operations and continued to survive. On the 32nd day, she saw him again. He was standing near one of her new traps, examining the placement, the wire gauge, the trigger mechanism. He did not look up when she approached, just studied her work. "Not bad," he finally said. "You learn fast." "I adapt. Most people would have come crying, would have tried to report me for harassment. I'm not most people." Briggs straightened, looked at her with something that might have been respect. "No, I guess you're not." He walked away without another word. But this time he left the trap intact. The cold storage pit was finished by the first week of December. 4 feet deep, lined with flat stones, a wooden lid sealed with pine pitch. Wren had killed a deer 3 days earlier. A young doe, clean shot with her bow at 15 yards. The arrow had punched through both lungs. The deer had run 30 feet and collapsed. She had dressed it in the field, carried the meat back to the cave-in quarters. It had taken 4 trips, but now she had 40 pounds of venison hanging in the cold pit, frozen solid, enough protein for 2 months if she was careful. She was reshaping arrow shafts by the fire when Ghost's ears perked up. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, not trying to hide. Wren grabbed her bow, knocked an arrow, moved to the entrance. Briggs Thorne stood 20 feet from the cave. He was not carrying his rifle. His hands were empty, raised slightly. A gesture of peace. "I saw the deer," he said. 15 yards shot through the lungs. Clean kill. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" "Taught myself. With that bow. That's a rough piece of work. It kills what I pointed at. That's all it needs to do." Briggs nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about this ridge, about you." Wren said nothing, kept the arrow knocked. "You want this land," Briggs continued. "You think you've earned it. Maybe you have. Maybe you haven't. I got a proposal." "I'm listening." 1 week. You and me. Trap competition. We each set 20 traps. End of the week, we count the take. Whoever brings in more game wins. Winner keeps the ridge. Full rights. Loser walks away. Never comes back. Wren's mind raced. It was a trap. Had to be. Briggs had years of experience. Knew the land. Knew the game patterns. She was just a 17-year-old girl who had been here for a month. But it was also a chance. A real chance. To earn what she had claimed. To prove she belonged. "What's to stop you from sabotaging my traps again?" she asked. "My word. We both stay off each other's lines until the count. No interference. Honor system. The word of a man who already destroyed my traps once. Briggs had the decency to look uncomfortable. That was a test. This is different. This is a binding agreement. I give you my word as a veteran and as Silas Thorne's grandson. No sabotage. Fair competition. Wren studied his face, looked for the lie, the angle. She did not find it. Or maybe she did not want to find it. Maybe she was too desperate to care. When? She asked. Starting tomorrow. 7 days. Meet back here on the 8th day. Noon. Bring your count. Wren lowered the bow. Did not release the tension on the string. If I win, you leave the ridge. Permanently. No more harassment. No more claims. If I win, you pack up and go. Find another mountain. This one's mine. They stared at each other. Two people who understood that survival was not about luck. It was about competence, about will, about refusing to quit when everything hurt and the world was cold and indifferent. Deal, Wren said. Briggs extended his hand. Wren hesitated for a moment. Then she eased the tension on her bow, set it down, stepped forward and gripped his hand. His palm was rough, calloused. The handshake was firm, final. May the best trapper win, Briggs said. He turned and walked away, disappeared into the forest. Ghost whined softly, came and pressed against Wren's leg. I know, boy, she whispered. I know. The next 7 days were the hardest of Wren's life. She scouted for 2 days before setting a single trap. Walked every game trail within 3 miles of the cave. Studied the terrain, the food sources, the water, the cover. Built a mental map of where the animals moved and why. Rabbits preferred dense undergrowth near water. Squirrels followed oak groves. Deer used the same trails every day unless pressured. She chose her locations with surgical precision. 18 traps for rabbits. Placed at bottlenecks. Narrow passages between rock and bramble where the game had no choice but to pass through. 2 traps for squirrels. Set along horizontal branches near productive trees. She used every trick she had learned. Every observation. Every failure and success. From the last month. The wire loops were exactly the right diameter. The triggers were sensitive but not hair trigger. The stakes were buried deep and angled to prevent pullout. Each trap was a tiny machine, a spring loaded with potential, waiting. On the 3rd day, she checked the line. 4 rabbits, not great, but not terrible. On the 4th day, 6 rabbits and 1 squirrel. On the 5th day, the weather turned. Temperatures dropped. The animals moved less, hunkered down. She caught only 2 rabbits. On the 6th day, nothing. Wren sat by her fire that night and did the math. 13 animals total. If Briggs had even a decent week, he would beat her. He had decades of experience, knew the ridge intimately, had probably set his traps in places she had not even thought to look. She had lost before she started. But on the 7th day, something changed. A winter storm moved through. Not heavy snow, just a dusting, but enough to stir the animals. to push them out of their dens in search of food before the real cold set in. Wren checked her line at dawn. Every trap had been productive. 8 rabbits, 2 squirrels. One of the rabbits was huge, a mature buck, 3 pounds of meat at least. She reset the traps, checked them again at noon. 3 more rabbits. By sunset, her final count was staggering. 24 animals, 18 rabbits, 6 squirrels, from 20 traps, an 80% success rate. Wren sat in her cave and stared at the pile of game. She had never caught this much in a single day, had never imagined it was possible. Tomorrow was the reckoning. Briggs Thorne was waiting when she arrived at the clearing. High noon, the sun pale and weak through the bare branches. He had his game laid out on a flat rock, skinned and dressed, ready for counting. Wren counted them twice to be sure. 19 animals, 16 rabbits, 3 squirrels. Briggs had lost. He stood with his arms crossed, his face unreadable. Wren set her own game down on a separate rock. 24 animals. The evidence spoke for itself. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Then Briggs laughed. A short, sharp bark of sound. 80% success rate. From 20 traps. That's professional grade. I had a good week. A good week, right. He shook his head. I've been trapping this ridge for 15 years. I know every trail, every den, every feeding ground. And you beat me by 5 animals. So what now? Briggs looked at her, really looked. And what Wren saw in his face was not anger, not resentment. It was something else, something harder to define. Respect. The ridge is yours, Calloway, he said quietly. You earned it fair. I won't bother you again. Won't mess with your traps. Won't claim territory that isn't mine anymore. Wren felt something loosen in her chest. Relief. Validation. The confirmation that she had not been crazy, that she could do this, could survive, could thrive. But let me give you some advice, Briggs continued. Winter's coming. Real winter. The kind that killed Silas. You're good. Better than I thought you'd be. But good isn't enough when the temperature drops to 10 below and the snow is 4 feet deep. You need more than skill. You need preparation. You need insurance. I'll manage. I'm sure you will. But if you don't, if things go sideways, if you need help. He paused, seemed to struggle with the words. I'm 3 miles southwest. Old cabin past the fire road. You won't ask. I know that. Too proud. Just like Silas. But if you're smart, you'll remember where I am. He picked up his game, slung it over his shoulder, started to walk away, then stopped. Turned back. One more thing. Your stepdad, Grant Holloway. He's been asking around town about a girl living in the woods. Bartender named Otis heard the talk. Told me Grant's been drinking heavy, making threats. Says you stole from him, that you owe him. Men like that don't quit. They escalate. Wren's blood went cold. How do you know about Grant? Small town. People talk. I make it my business to know what's happening on my ridge, even when it's not my ridge anymore. He met her eyes. Watch yourself. The forest is dangerous, but people are worse. He walked away. This time he did not look back. Wren stood in the clearing alone. Ghost sat beside her. The dog's breath made small clouds in the cold air. The pile of game at her feet was proof of her competence, her ability to survive and thrive in this unforgiving place. But Briggs's warning echoed in her mind. Grant was looking for her. And Grant was not the kind of man who forgot, who forgave, who let go. She gathered her game, carried it back to the cave, hung the meat in the cold storage pit, fed the fire, checked her weapons, the bow, the hatchet. Silas's old knife, not enough. Not nearly enough if Grant came looking. That night she sat by the fire and opened Silas's journal, flipped to the last entry she had read, then kept going. Into the blank pages, she wrote carefully, deliberately. December 8th, 2024. Beat Briggs Thorne in trap competition, 24-19. Ridge is mine now, earned through competence. But Briggs warned me. Grant is looking. I need to prepare, need to be ready. Silas, you wrote that the ridge keeps who it chooses. I think it chose me. Now I have to prove I'm worth keeping. W.C. She closed the journal, set it on the shelf, and began to plan for war. The radio crackled to life at 6 in the morning. Wren had found it 2 weeks earlier. An old transistor radio abandoned at a campsite half a mile from the cave. The batteries were weak, but it still pulled in the AM station from town. The weatherman's voice was urgent, almost excited. Major winter storm system moving in from the northwest. National Weather Service has issued a blizzard warning for the entire region, expecting 12 to 18 inches of snow with wind gusts up to 40 miles per hour. Whiteout conditions likely. This will be the largest storm system we've seen in 25 years. Residents are advised to stay indoors, stock up on supplies, avoid all non-essential travel. Wren clicked off the radio, looked at Ghost. The dog's ears were back. He sensed something coming. She had 3 days, maybe 4. Time to prepare. The firewood pile needed to be massive. She spent the entire first day cutting and hauling, filled the main chamber until there was barely room to move, stacked wood along the walls, under the sleeping platform, anywhere it would fit and stay dry. The second day was for food. She checked every trap, reset them all, caught 6 rabbits and 4 squirrels, dressed them, hung them in the cold storage pit, added them to the 30 pounds of venison already frozen there. She filled every container she had with water from the stream, 5-gallon buckets, bottles, the old canteen from Silas, hauled them back and stored them in the second chamber, where they would freeze but remain accessible. The third day was for fortification. The door was solid, but solid was not enough. She needed it to be impenetrable. She found a massive oak branch, 6 inches in diameter, 8 feet long, dead, but not rotten. She dragged it back to the cave and carved brackets into the rock on either side of the entrance, deep brackets, angled to hold the weight. The oak branch fit perfectly across the door, a crossbar that would take a battering ram to break. She tested it, threw her full weight against the door from outside. The planks did not budge. The crossbar held. The cave was now a fortress. On the fourth day, the first flakes began to fall. Grant Holloway sat at the bar in Patterson's Tavern and nursed his fifth whiskey of the afternoon. The bartender, Otis Brennan, was a thin man in his 60s with watery eyes and hands that shook from 40 years of sampling his own inventory. He wiped the same section of bar for the third time and tried to avoid eye contact. Grant was a mean drunk, always had been. But lately he had crossed over into something worse, something dangerous. The other regulars had learned to give him space, to let him drink alone, to not engage. But Grant was talking whether anyone listened or not. "She stole from me," he said. His voice was thick, slurred. "My tools, my supplies, everything I worked for. Just took it and ran off into the woods like some kind of animal." Otis said nothing, kept wiping. "She's out there right now, living in the forest, on my property, using my stuff. Probably thinks she's so smart, thinks she got away with it." "That's state forest land, Grant," Otis said quietly. "Not your property." "The hell it's not. My taxes pay for it. That makes it mine. And she's trespassing." Otis set down his rag. "Maybe you should let the sheriff handle it. It's getting cold out there. Storm coming. Let them bring her in safe." Grant's hand slammed down on the bar, hard enough to make the glasses jump. "I don't need the sheriff. I need to get my stuff back. Need to teach that girl some respect." The door to the tavern opened. Cold air rushed in along with swirling snow. A man in his late 30s stepped inside. Tall, broad-shouldered, Briggs Thorne. He stomped snow from his boots and moved to the far end of the bar. Grant's eyes narrowed. You hunt that ridge. State forest land. You seen a girl up there." Briggs ordered a beer from Otis. Did not look at Grant. "I've seen a lot of things. A girl, 17, dark hair. Probably camping. Probably freezing to death by now. Haven't seen anyone like that. You're lying, I can tell. Where is she?" Briggs turned slowly. His eyes were flat, cold. The eyes of a man who had seen combat and was not impressed by small-town bullies. "I don't know what you're talking about. And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. Now leave me alone." Grant stood up, swayed slightly. His face was flushed with alcohol and rage. "You think you're tough? Think you're some kind of hero because you went to war. I'll report your ass for poaching. Get your hunting license pulled. Get you fined into bankruptcy." Briggs took a long drink of his beer. Set it down carefully. "You could try. But I've been hunting these woods legally for 15 years. Every tag, every permit, every regulation followed to the letter. You got nothing on me. Now sit down and finish your drink before you say something that gets you hurt." The two men stared at each other. The tension in the bar was thick enough to cut. Otis stepped between them. "That's enough. Both of you. Grant, you've had enough. Time to go." "I'm not done." "Yes, you are. Out. Now." Grant threw a 20 on the bar, grabbed his coat, staggered toward the door. But before he left, he turned back, pointed a shaking finger at Briggs. "You're protecting her. I know it. And when I find her, I'm going to remember that you lied to me." He slammed out into the snow. Otis watched him go, his face drawn with worry. He leaned toward Briggs and spoke quietly. "He's been asking everyone, old-timers who hunt that ridge. Said he heard there's been smoke spotted up near the old trail. Someone mentioned seeing tracks. He's got it in his head she's up there somewhere." Briggs's jaw tightened. "That's his business, not mine. He's drunk and angry, and there's a blizzard coming. That's a bad combination." Otis picked up the phone behind the bar, dialed the county sheriff's office. "Yeah, this is Otis Brennan at Patterson's. I need to report a drunk driver. Grant Holloway, heading east on Route 7 in a blue pickup. He's been drinking heavy and talking crazy about going up into the state forest. There's a blizzard coming and he's in no condition to be driving, let alone hiking." He paused, listened. "Yeah, please hurry. I got a bad feeling about this." He hung up, looked at Briggs. "You really haven't seen her?" Briggs finished his beer. "I've seen her. She's surviving. Doing better than most people would. But that's between me and her. Not Grant. He's going to go looking, storm or no storm. I know. That's his choice, and hers to deal with. She's just a kid." Briggs stood, dropped money on the bar. "She's tougher than you think. Tougher than Grant thinks. If he goes up there looking for a scared little girl, he's gonna find something very different." He walked out into the snow. Otis stood alone in the empty bar, the phone in his hand, the weight of what was coming settling over him, like the snow settling over the town. The storm hit with shocking speed. One moment the snow was gentle, almost peaceful. The next it was a howling wall of white that erased the world. Wren was inside the cave when it arrived. She had just finished sealing the entrance with the oak crossbar when the wind began to scream. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an hour. The cold was not just uncomfortable. It was aggressive, predatory. It found every gap in her clothing, every crack in the stone, tried to leach the heat from her body through sheer proximity. But inside the cave behind the door and the crossbar, she was safe. The Dakota fire hole burned hot and clean. The smoke dispersed invisibly into the storm. The firewood pile was massive, enough to last 2 weeks if she was careful. Ghost lay near the fire, relaxed, content. The dog had stopped flinching at every sound, had learned that the cave was safe, was home. Wren sat on her sleeping platform and sharpened her knife. The rhythmic scrape of steel on stone was meditation, preparation. The blade gleamed in the firelight, sharp enough to shave the hair from her arm. She was ready. For the storm, for the isolation, for whatever came next. The pounding on the door started at 9 o'clock that night, heavy, rhythmic, the sound of a fist hammering against oak planks. Ghost's head snapped up. A growl started deep in his chest, low, dangerous. Wren was on her feet instantly, knife in one hand, bow in the other, an arrow already nocked. The pounding continued. Then a voice, muffled by the door and the storm but unmistakable. "Wren, I know you're in there. Open this door." Grant, her blood turned to ice. He had found her, had tracked her through the storm, had climbed the mountain in a blizzard to get to her. "You hear me? Open up. You got my stuff, my tools, you owe me." Wren moved to the door, put her eye to a small gap between two planks, a peephole she had carved for exactly this purpose. Grant was barely visible through the swirling snow, a dark shape, hunched against the wind. He was not wearing proper winter gear, just his work jacket and jeans, no gloves, no hat. Already his movements were sluggish, uncoordinated. He was going to die out there. "Wren, I'm not leaving until you open this door. You hear me? I'll stay out here all night if I have to." His fist hammered against the oak. The door shuddered but held. The crossbar did not move. Wren stepped back. Her heart was a drum. Her breath came in short gasps. Ghost was on his feet now, barking, deep, aggressive barks that echoed in the stone chamber. "Shut that dog up, shut him up, and open this door." Grant's voice was rising, losing coherence. The alcohol and the cold were working on him, breaking him down. "You think you can just take what's mine? Just run away and hide. I'm your father. You owe me everything." "You're not my father," Wren said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "My father's dead. You're just the drunk my mother married." The pounding stopped. For a moment there was only the wind. Then Grant's voice came back, lower, more dangerous. "I'm gonna break this door down. You understand me? I'm gonna get in there. And when I do, you're gonna wish you'd opened it when I asked nice." A new sound began, metal on wood, sharp, violent. He had something, a tool from his truck, a tire iron, a crowbar. He was attacking the door. Splinters of wood flew from the inside surface. The planks were thick, 2 inches of solid oak. But they were not invincible. Under sustained assault, they would fail. Wren grabbed the crossbar, made sure it was seated properly in the brackets. The oak branch was massive, 6 inches thick. It would take a battering ram to break it, but Grant was not using strategy. He was using rage, pure animal fury. The tire iron rose and fell, rose and fell. Each impact sent vibrations through the door, through the stone, through Wren's bones. "Stop," she yelled. "Grant, stop. There's a storm. You need to get to shelter." "This is shelter. My shelter. Open the door." "I can't." "Yes, you can. You just won't. Ungrateful, worthless, just like your mother." The words hit harder than the tire iron. Wren's vision went red. Her hands tightened on the bow. She could shoot through the gaps in the door, could put an arrow into his chest. End this. But she did not, could not, because that would make her a killer, would make her the same as him, someone who solved problems with violence. The assault continued. Minutes passed. 10, 20. The sound was constant, maddening. But the door held. The oak crossbar did not crack, did not bend, and slowly, gradually, the impacts grew weaker, less frequent. Grant's curses became slurred, incoherent. Then they stopped altogether. Wren waited, listened. The only sound was the wind, the endless, screaming wind. She moved to the peephole, looked out. Grant was slumped against the door, his back pressed to the wood, his head tilted forward. Snow was already accumulating on his shoulders, his hair, turning him into a white statue. He was still alive. She could see his chest rising and falling. Shallow breaths, labored, hypothermia. Stage 2, maybe stage 3. He had minutes, maybe less. Wren's hand went to the crossbar. Her fingers curled around the oak. One lift, one pull. The door would open. She could drag him inside, strip off his wet clothes, wrap him in blankets, put him by the fire, save him. Ghost stood beside her, watching, waiting for her decision. Behind her, the fire crackled. The heat radiating from the Dakota hole filled the chamber with warmth and light and life. Outside, Grant Holloway was dying. The man who had married her mother, who had promised to take care of them, who had turned into a monster when the woman he loved was taken away. Wren thought about her mother, about the promise she had made at the funeral, to survive, to be strong, to not let the world break her the way it had broken Grant. She thought about Silas Thorne, about the journal, about the entry that said some people can't be saved, that trying to save them only drags you down with them. She thought about the last 8 weeks, about everything she had built, everything she had earned, the fortress of stone and wood and will that stood between her and the world. Her hand tightened on the crossbar. Then, slowly, deliberately, she let go, stepped back, turned away from the door. Ghost whined. A soft, questioning sound. "I can't," Wren whispered. "I can't save him. I can't let him in. If I open that door, he'll destroy everything. He'll take this place from me. Take my life from me. Again." She sat down by the fire, wrapped her arms around Ghost, buried her face in his fur. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire burned. And between them, on the threshold, Grant Holloway's breathing grew slower, shallower, until it stopped altogether. Wren did not sleep that night. She sat by the fire and stared at the flames and listened to the storm rage against her door. Ghost never left her side. The dog seemed to understand that something fundamental had changed, that the girl who had run into the forest was gone, replaced by someone harder, someone who had learned that survival sometimes meant letting go. When dawn came, the storm had passed. The world outside was silent, muffled by 3 feet of fresh snow. Wren lifted the crossbar, pushed the door open. It moved slowly, heavily. Something was blocking it. Grant's body. He was frozen solid. Ice crystals coated his face, his hands. His clothes were stiff with frost. He looked smaller in death, diminished. Not the terrifying figure who had haunted her nightmares, but just a middle-aged man who had made bad choices and paid the ultimate price. Wren felt nothing. No grief, no guilt, no relief. Just a vast, empty silence where emotions should have been. She grabbed his boots, pulled. The body moved reluctantly. frozen to the ground. She pulled harder, dragged him away from the entrance. 30 yards, 60, into a small clearing where the snow was undisturbed. She did not bury him. The ground was frozen solid, iron hard, impossible to dig. Instead, she covered him with snow, piled it high, built a mound that would last until spring. No marker, no words, just snow and silence. Ghost sat at the edge of the clearing, watching. When Wren was done, the dog came to her, pressed his head against her leg. She ran her fingers through his fur, drew what comfort she could from the simple, uncomplicated loyalty of the animal beside her. Then she walked back to the cave, closed the door, dropped the crossbar, and began to wait for what came next. The sound of engines came 2 days later, heavy vehicles, grinding up the fire road in low gear, chains on the tires biting into the packed snow. Wren heard them from a mile away. She stood at the entrance of her cave and watched as 2 Sheriff's Department SUVs crept into view. They stopped at the base of the ridge. Doors opened. 4 people climbed out. 2 deputies in brown uniforms, a man in civilian clothes, and a woman, 40s, athletic build, short blonde hair. She moved like she was in charge. They found Grant's truck first, parked crooked on the fire road, half buried in snow. They searched it, found the tire iron in the back, marks on the handle, evidence of recent use. Then they began following the tracks, Grant's tracks, leading up the mountain, toward the cave. The lead woman was Deputy Lennox Hayes, 15-year veteran of the county sheriff's department. She had seen bar fights and domestic disputes and drug overdoses and every variety of rural tragedy. But she had never seen anything quite like this. The tracks led straight to a rock face, to a door built into the mountain itself. And in front of that door, a mound of fresh snow, too regular to be natural, too deliberate to be accidental. Lennox knelt beside it, brushed away the top layer, revealed a hand, frozen, blue-white, locked in a claw. "Got a body," she called. Her partner, a young deputy named Collins, came over, started to uncover more of the mound. Within minutes, they had exposed Grant Holloway's face, his torso, the frost-rimed clothing, the empty eyes staring at nothing. "Hypothermia," Collins said. "Looks like he froze to death." In front of a door, Lennox stood, examined the entrance to the cave, the oak planks, the deep gouges from the tire iron. He was trying to get inside. Someone wouldn't let him in. She knocked on the door. 3 sharp raps, official, commanding. "County Sheriff's Department, we know you're in there. We need to talk. Please open the door." Silence. Then the sound of wood scraping on stone. The door opened inward. A girl stood in the entrance, 17 years old, maybe 18. Dark hair pulled back, worn flannel shirt, work boots, clean, healthy, not shivering, not afraid. Behind her, Lennox could see into the cave, the controlled fire burning in a sophisticated pit, the neatly stacked firewood, the organized supplies, the sleeping platform, the tools hanging from pegs driven into the rock. This was not a shelter. This was a home, built with skill and intention and an understanding of survival that most adults never achieved. "Ren Calloway?" Lennox asked. "Yes." "I'm Deputy Hayes. This is Deputy Collins. We need to ask you some questions about Grant Holloway." "He's dead." The bluntness of it caught Lennox off guard. No tears, no hysteria, just a simple statement of fact. "Yes, he is. Can you tell me what happened?" Ren looked at the mound of snow, at Grant's partially exposed body, then back at the deputy. "He came here 2 nights ago, during the blizzard. He was drunk. He demanded I open the door. I refused. He tried to break it down, failed, collapsed outside, froze to death. Why didn't you let him in?" "Because he would have hurt me. He's hurt me before. I ran away from him 8 weeks ago, built this place to be safe from him. Opening that door would have destroyed everything I worked for." Collins stepped forward. "You let him die. You could have saved him." "Could I?" Ren's eyes were steady, unflinching. "He was violent, drunk, trying to break into my home. I was a 17-year-old girl alone in a cave. If I'd opened that door, what do you think would have happened?" Lennox held up a hand, silencing Collins. "We need you to come with us, down to the station, answer some questions officially." "Am I under arrest?" "Not at this time, but we need to investigate. A man is dead." Ren nodded slowly. "Can I bring my dog?" "Of course." She turned back into the cave, banked the fire, grabbed a worn canvas jacket, whistled for Ghost. The German shepherd appeared and stood at her side. Together they walked down the mountain. Behind them the cave stood silent and empty. A fortress built by a girl who had learned that sometimes survival meant saying no, even when saying no meant death. The interrogation room at the county sheriff's office was small and windowless. A metal table, 3 chairs, a recording device. Lennox Hayes sat across from Ren Calloway and tried to read the girl in front of her. No fidgeting, no nervous tells. Ren sat with her hands folded on the table and answered every question with calm, direct honesty. "How long had you been living in the cave?" 8 weeks, since early October." "Why did you run away?" "Grant was abusive. After my mother died, he started drinking. Started hitting me. I knew if I stayed, it would get worse. So I left." "Why didn't you go to the police to social services?" "Because I'm 17. They would have put me in foster care, moved me around, taken away what little control I had left. I chose a different path. You chose to live in a cave. I chose to survive on my own terms." Lennox leaned back. "Tell me about the night Grant died." Ren recounted it. Every detail. The pounding on the door, the threats, the tire iron, the decision to not open the door, the slow, terrible silence that followed. "You knew he would die out there," Lennox said. "I knew it was possible." "Yes. But you didn't help him." "I couldn't help him without putting myself in danger. I made a choice between his life and my safety. I chose my safety. That's cold. That's survival. Collins, who had been standing in the corner, stepped forward. You're going to be charged. Criminally negligent homicide at minimum. You had a duty to help. You refused. That's a crime. Wren looked at him. What duty? The duty to let an abusive drunk into my home. The duty to risk my life for someone who had already proven he wanted to hurt me. The duty to not let someone freeze to death on your doorstep. It wasn't my doorstep. It was a cave in a state forest. Grant trespassed. He came to hurt me. The storm killed him. Not me. The door opened. A man in a suit entered. District Attorney Thomas Brennan, Otis's son. He had driven up from the county seat as soon as he heard about the case. Deputy Hayes, can I have a word? They stepped outside. Wren sat alone in the room with Collins. The young deputy stared at her with barely concealed hostility. You think you're smart, he said. Think you got it all figured out. But you killed a man. You're gonna pay for that. I defended myself. There's a difference. In the hallway, Lennox and the DA were having a heated discussion. She let him die, Tom. That's clear. What's also clear is that Grant Holloway was a drunk with a documented history of domestic violence. That he drove up a mountain in a blizzard. That he attempted to forcibly enter a dwelling where he was not welcome. And that he assaulted the door with a weapon. This girl didn't kill him. She refused to rescue him. There's a legal distinction. She had a duty to help. Did she? She's a minor. He was her abuser. He came to her home with violent intent during a life-threatening storm. What court is going to convict her for prioritizing her own safety? She's 17. She's a child. A child who built a functioning home in the wilderness. Who survived for 2 months alone. Who demonstrated more competence and self-sufficiency than most adults. You want to prosecute her, you're going to have to prove she had a legal duty to rescue her abuser. Good luck with that. Lennox was silent for a moment. Then she nodded. What about the cave? She can't stay there. Why not? She's a minor who has clearly demonstrated the ability to care for herself. File for emancipation. She'll get it. Back in the interrogation room, the door opened. Lennox entered alone. You're free to go, she said. No charges at this time, but the DA wants to review the case. Don't leave the area. Wren stood. My cave counts as the area. For now. They walked out together. Ghost was waiting in the lobby. Wren knelt and wrapped her arms around the dog, buried her face in his fur. For the first time since Grant's death, she let herself feel. Let the fear and the grief and the terrible weight of what she had done wash over her. But only for a moment. Then she stood, wiped her eyes, and walked out into the cold December afternoon. 3 days later, Briggs Thorne appeared at the cave. Wren was chopping wood when she saw him coming up the trail. He was carrying something. A canvas bag over his shoulder. Ghost barked once, then recognized the scent and settled down. Heard what happened, Briggs said. Heard about Grant. News travels fast. Small town. He set the bag down. Brought you something. Wren looked inside. A box of ammunition. .22 caliber. 500 rounds. And beneath it, wrapped in oilcloth, a rifle. A marlin lever action. Clean. Well-maintained. Beautiful. I can't accept this, Wren said. It belonged to Silas, my grandfather. I found it in his cabin after he disappeared. Been sitting in my closet for 40 years. He'd want you to have it. Why? Because you did what he couldn't. You survived. And you're still here. Still fighting. That's worth something. Wren lifted the rifle. The weight of it was solid. Real. A tool. A weapon. A responsibility. Thank you. Briggs nodded. Started to leave. Then stopped. The DA called me. Asked me to testify. About the cave. About you. What did you say? I told him the truth. That you earned this ridge fare. That you're more capable than most people twice your age. That Grant Holloway trespassed on state land with violent intent and got what nature gave him. Will that help? It won't hurt. He met her eyes. You did the right thing, Calloway. Don't let anyone tell you different. You chose your life over his. That's not murder. That's survival. He walked away, disappeared into the trees. Wren stood alone with the rifle in her hands and the weight of his words settling over her like snow. The DA dropped the case on December 20th. Insufficient evidence to support charges. Self-defense within legal parameters. No duty to rescue under the circumstances. The official statement was dry, clinical, but the message was clear. Wren Calloway had broken no laws. The emancipation hearing was scheduled for January 15th. Lennox Hayes testified on her behalf. Described the cave, the survival systems, the competence and maturity Wren had demonstrated. Briggs Thorne testified. Confirmed that Wren had won the ridge through skill. That she was capable of independent living. Even Otis Brennan, the bartender, testified. Described Grant's deterioration, his threats, his violent intent. The judge, a woman in her 60s who had seen every variety of family tragedy, listened to it all, reviewed the evidence, examined photographs of the cave, read Silas Thorne's journal, which Wren had submitted as proof of historical precedent. On January 22nd, she signed the order. Wren Elizabeth Calloway was legally emancipated, free to make her own decisions, control her own life, live on her own terms. Wren walked out of the courthouse with Ghost at her side and a piece of paper that declared her an adult in the eyes of the law. She was 17 years old. She owned nothing but what she could carry. She had no money, no job, no family, but she had a home, built by her own hands, defended with her own will, earned through competence and courage, and the refusal to quit when everything was cold and hard and dark. She walked back to the ridge, climbed the familiar trail, pushed through the ivy curtain, opened the door and stepped inside. The fire had burned down to embers. She fed it, built it back up. The flames caught, grew, filled the chamber with warmth and light. Ghost settled by the fire. Wren pulled out Silas's journal, turned to the page where she had last written, picked up a pencil. January 22nd, 2025. Emancipation granted. Case closed. Grant is buried in the town cemetery. I didn't go to the funeral. The ridge is legally mine now through squatters' rights and historical precedent. Briggs helped with the paperwork. He's not a friend, but he's not an enemy. Respect is enough. Silas, you wrote that the ridge keeps who it chooses. I think it chose me. But more than that, I chose it. Chose to stay when I could have run. Chose to fight when I could have surrendered. Chose to survive when dying would have been easier. I'm not running anymore. This is my ground, my home. I'll keep it, defend it, live on it until I don't anymore. The ridge kept me. Now I'll keep the ridge. W.C. She closed the journal, set it on the shelf beside Silas's dog tags. Outside, the January wind moved through the trees. Inside, the fire burned, and Wren Calloway, 17 years old, and alone, and utterly free, closed her eyes and slept the sleep of someone who had earned their place in the world. The months that followed were a lesson in permanence. Wren expanded the cave, dug deeper into the second chamber, created more storage, more living space. She built a rainwater collection system, a root cellar, a smoking rack for preserving meat. The trap lines produced consistently. She learned to tan hides, to make her own clothes, to forge tools from scrap metal she scavenged from the forest. Briggs came by once a month, never stayed long, just checked in, brought news from town, sometimes left supplies, salt, sugar, things she could not produce herself. In April, a group of hikers got lost on the ridge. Wren found them, led them back to the fire road, refused payment. But word spread. The girl who lived in the mountain, the survivor. By summer, people started coming. Not many, but enough. Asking questions, wanting to learn. How to build a fire without matches. How to find water. How to survive when everything went wrong. Wren taught them, not because she wanted to, but because she understood something Silas had not. Survival was not about isolation. It was about connection, about passing on knowledge, about building something that lasted beyond one person's life. On March 1st, 4 months after Grant's death, Wren carved a new line into the cave wall. Beside ST 1987, she added WC 2024, no end date, because she was not ending. She was continuing, building, growing. The ridge had kept her. Now she would keep it. For as long as her strength lasted, for as long as the fire burned, for as long as she had breath in her body and will in her heart. She stepped back, examined her work, then nodded once, turned back to the fire, fed it, tended it, and lived.